All right, so today I wanted to demonstrate the hip thrust. There are a few common errors that people seem to have. And so if you've ever done the hip thrust and you've said, I feel it in my hamstrings, or I feel it in my lower back, or maybe you just don't feel it in the glutes, where you're supposed to feel it the most, then this video is probably for you, so watch on. All right, so the first thing you're gonna wanna do for a hip thrust is have something you can pin your back against. I am using this Brett Contreras glute bench large, but you don't need this. This was like maybe like $150 or $180, but I really liked it, so I got it, and I'm really big on hip thrusts, but you do not need this. You can use the back of a couch, the front of a couch rather. You could use a chair, a stable chair, no wheels on the chair, a bench, like a bench press, bench, really anything. You can be creative with this. You can even do it on the ground and just do a regular glute bridge. So first things first is I line up my shoulder blades to be just above the edge of this bench. So this bench is pinned right underneath my shoulder blades, okay? The next thing I do is I'm gonna find my footing. I like to go about hip width apart. If you go any wider, what can happen is your knees will go inward, and we don't want that to happen. So right about here, and I point my toes in line with my knees, right? So not out like this, not in like that. They're in line with my knees so that when I'm pushing up, boom, okay? Next thing is, at the top, you want your lower leg to be perpendicular to the ground, 90 degrees, right? So right about there feels good for me. Might move them out a little bit, but I think right about there is good for me. Next thing is, this is a small tip that most people don't have issues with, but refrain from pushing your elbows down into this bench. It's just, don't do that, because you're helping yourself out. If the weight is that heavy that you need to be doing this, lower the weight, okay? I would really recommend doing, the first few times you do this especially, do it with body weight. Try to get to 30 reps for a few sets, and just like this, Okay, so next thing is, we want to, for the hip thrust, the whole purpose of this is hip flexion, and extension. And what is doing that, the prime mover for that is the glutes. So there are two ways to do the hip thrust. One is the full range of motion, which, I'm normally a big proponent of always doing full range of motion, but just hear me out, because there are some exercises where, depending on what your priorities are, you might want to pick one or the other. So for the hip thrust, full range of motion would look just like this, right? All the way down and all the way up, squeezing the glutes at the top, and then flat as a board, from all the way from chest down to my legs, flat as a board, right? Now the other way to do the hip thrust is just for the glute focus, is you see where my knees are tracking back and forth like this? Right when they stop tracking back and forth, that is when the glutes are going to be taking over. So right here to right here, this is going to be glute focused right here, if you're just doing this short range of motion. There's a few common errors that I see. One, we talked about already, if your knees are caving in every time you push, just move your feet a little bit closer together, right? Second one, you feel it more in your hamstrings. If that's the case, then you're probably out too far. Move your feet in 3 inches, try again, see where you're feeling it. Now make sure when you're pushing with your feet, you really want to be driving into the ground, but more than anything, you want to be keeping even foot pressure across the entire foot. So what that would look like if you're doing it wrong is if you're pushing way too much on the balls of your feet and going like that, that's not good. Instead, you should be using even foot pressure across the entire foot and driving your heels and midfoot, boom, into the ground. Just like that. If you feel it in your back, and this is a very, very, very common one, what's happening is when you're doing a hip thrust, you want to be pushing your hips toward the sky, but what people are doing when they're feeling it in their back is they're hyperextending their back and pushing their bellies toward the sky, really. So what it would look like, I'm going to do a good hip thrust first, just like that. And now when you would feel it in your back is if you went like this. Do you see the difference there, where my belly is clearly going very much toward the sky? So in order to alleviate that or fix that, what you want to do is, instead of being like this, you want to tuck the ribs down, just like that, okay? So we're going to try it without tucked ribs, and now with tucked ribs. You can do these body weight, just like I was. If you don't have any equipment, this is a great one to do. You could do these single leg, just like that. You could do these with a dumbbell or a backpack filled with rocks, a stack of books, a case of White Claws or something. It really doesn't matter, just something to weight the hips. Or you could use a barbell, but I would highly recommend, if you are going to use a barbell, have something like this. This is Elevator Fitness. I'm sure I bought it on Amazon for $5 to $10. Wrap that around if you're at a gym, they probably have things like this. Towels would work nice too. Just something to protect your hips from getting too beat up by this barbell. You can end up with some pretty decent bruises. So just like that. Thanks for checking out this tutorial. If there's any other in-depth tutorials you'd like for certain exercises, leave them in the comments below. Have a good day.